Welcome to SST College of Arts and Commerce. This is SST Edupedia. Myself, Assistant Professor Yogesh Patil from the Department of IT and Computer Science. Today, we are going to see the lecture topic for FYIT subject Microprocessor Architecture for Semester 2, and the topic is Introduction to Input-Output Interface. Students, what is mean by input-output interface and for what purpose they are used for? So, input-output interface is used as a method which helps in transforming of information between the internal storage devices, that is memory, and the external peripheral devices. So, a peripheral devices is that which provide input and output for the computer. It is also called as input-output devices. For example, a keyboard and the mouse, they provide input to the computer, are called as an input devices, while a monitor and the printer are provided the output to the computer, which is known as an output devices. Just like the external hard drives, there is also availability of some peripheral devices which are able to provide both input as well as output. So as you can see, in microprocessor there is a CPU and the memory devices. We have an access with an address bus, data bus, as well as control bus and IO bus. So monitor, which is worked as an output device, it has an interface in between, or it has been used with an interface that is known as an IO bus, and it sends a data to CPU as well as memory. Similarly, we have keyboard and hard disk. Keyboard here is worked as an input device and hard disk is used as an memory unit. So what is mean by input port? As you can see in a figure, in microservice architecture, the data bus registers from D0 to D7, they have an input from the input port, and the data from input devices has been transferred to the input port, and further data is transferred to the particular registers. So it is used to read data from input devices such as keyboard, and the simplest form of input port is a buffer. The input devices is connected to the microprocessor through buffer, which is shown in a figure, and this buffer is a tri-state buffer, and its output is available only when it enables a signal is activated. When microprocessor wants to read data from the input device, that is keyboard, and the control signals from the microprocessor activates the buffer by asserting enable input of the buffer. So once buffer is enabled, the data from the input device is available on the data bus. So as we have seen in the previous figure, the data like this, the data from keyboard or any other devices is transferred to the IO bus, and then further it has been transferred to the CPU. So the data which has been transferred from the input devices will read by microprocessor, and microprocessor reads this data for an initiating by a read command. Similarly, for output devices, now output devices just like a monitor, printer, so it is used to send the data to the output device such as display from the microprocessor. The simplest form of output port is a latch, and the output device is connected to the microprocessor through a latch, which is shown in a figure. As you can see, the registers D0 to D7 from the data bus, they are transferring the output to the output devices, that is nothing but a latch with a clock timer, and then the data is transferred to the particular output device, that is such as monitor, printer, etc. As we have discussed earlier, in microprocessor based system, the only purpose of peripheral devices is just to provide special communication links for the interfacing them with the CPU. To resolve the differences between peripheral devices and the CPU, there is a special need for communication links. So the major differences are as follows. The very first is the nature of peripheral devices is electromagnetic and electromechanical. So, and the nature of the CPU is electric. So there is a lot of difference in the mode of operation of both peripheral devices and the CPU. So there is also a synchronization mechanism because the data transfer rate of the peripheral devices are slow down in the CPU, or it makes CPU slower. So in peripheral devices, data code and the format are differ from the format in the CPU as well as in the memory. So the operating mode of the peripheral devices are different and each may be controlled so as not to disturb the operation of the further peripheral devices connected to the CPU. So in this case, the devices which are or different devices connected to as a peripheral devices, they won't get disturbed by the other devices commands. So what are the functions of input-output interfaces? The very first function is it is used to synchronize the operation speed of CPU with respect to input-output devices. It selects the input devices which is appropriate for the interpretation of input-output devices. It is capable of providing signals like control and timing signals. In this data, the buffering can be possible through data bus. There are various error detectors available. Then it also converts a serial data into the parallel data and vice versa. Then it also converts digital data into analog signal and vice versa. These are few functions of input-output interfaces. So friends, we have discussed about input-output devices. We have seen an introduction. We have seen how the data has been transferred from one device, input device to output CPU and CPU to output device. Thank you.